Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 12 of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. If last week was the Edgar episode, this week is the Aaron Rodgers episode. We are gonna get into some
Andrew Luck.
baseball talk, and we're gonna talk football. There was some big college football news that we are going to talk about. Just trying to find someone to come on. Guest has been a little bit of an issue that we're going to get on. We're going to have someone who went to the University of Texas hop on and talk about their reaction down there. But we just have to find these guests, find the time to get them on. So that is coming. Don't you worry. But this week, the big news is MLB All-Star ballot or All-Star rosters have been released. And there were some surprises, to say the least. Some guys that you look at and you're like, how did they not make it here? It just doesn't make sense. And some issues with the voting as well that we're going to dig into everything All-Star game related right here. And we're going to start with some snubs. Of course, we're Mariners fans. We just recorded Mariners Minis. Ty France, baffling how he doesn't get on the All-Star roster, especially after being a finalist to start the game at first base with Vlad Jr. Jacob, can you wrap your head around why Ty France is not on the All-Star team?
Because baseball doesn't want a cool All-Star game anymore. They're looking over at the Pro Bowl and thinking, maybe if no one cares, it would be better. No, I think Angie Mentink said it best. If you don't count Arias making it the minimum of 50% games at first base, which you shouldn't, you should play the position you're elected for. Then France ranks first in BWAR, second in hits, third in RBIs, first in batting average, first in on-base percentage, first in on-base percentage slugging, and second in FWAR. First in runs created. I mean, just an incredible season. And that's just American League, of course. No, he should be playing in the All-Star game. And you shouldn't have all of these extra little gimmick rules to try to make it more watchable. It should be the best players. It should be the most exciting game that it can be. It should be worthwhile. It should be tailored to the people who are going to be watching it anyway, not tailored to the people who don't care. And I feel like that's the biggest failure of Manfred is he's constantly trying to redesign the game to appeal to non-baseball fans and making actual baseball fans pull their hair out constantly. You don't need to make it a reality TV show. Oh, vote 5 times a day online every single day. And you're going to get people who have nothing better to do voting 250,000 times for a guy who hasn't played a game all year. It just, you need to do better, MLB.
It really is a shame that you do have these, we'll call them trolls, that go on and just vote for their favorite team's players. I mean, sometimes those guys don't deserve it. I hate to break it to you. For the Mariners, I had them getting 3 All-Stars. I won't get into my Cal Raleigh. I'll push him aside. I'll give ground on that one. But I had 3 Mariners making it that I just see other guys on other teams that are better. So I voted, and I voted who I thought deserved to be playing in the All-Star game. That's how it should be. And if the fans did a decent job, I should say, because of where the fans come in is that starting spot. They narrow it down to the top 2, and then the fans vote for the starter. And I get Vlad Jr. being named starter. He's having a great season, and he's a much bigger name than Ty France. But how does a guy finish second in that, and then they don't even put him on the team?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. It's like they're discrediting fans, saying, hey, we're going to let you decide this, but if we don't like it, we're changing everything. There's no point in having fans even vote, whether you like fans voting or not, if they're just going to completely disregard what the fans voted for. It is really mind-boggling. And I know you talked about a guy who hasn't even played getting a lot of – Fernando Tatis got a lot of votes. He hasn't suited up this season. And
Right.
Nobody really knows when he's going to. Stuff like that should draw the MLB's attention, saying, okay, we got to make some changes in this process because this is just all sorts of messed up.
And to be honest with you, I miss the days where we went to games as kids in June every year, and you had those little ballot tickers and you poked the holes. Yeah. And it was your favorite. And yeah, we had Mariner bias. We were kids that were like, this is the best team ever. It was the mid 2000s. It was not the best team ever.
Richie Sexton to the All-Star game.
I never went that far. But it was just a different time, and it's getting so ridiculous anymore. Like I said, it sounds like a reality TV show. It sounds like American Idol. Waste as much of your time as you can, and then your favorites, whether they're deserving or not, can go. And it really hurts, especially because as we're looking at these Mount Rushmores, All-Star games are a tangible item that we're using to count the greatness of a player. And it shouldn't be waved around willy-nilly because a million fans decided to sit on their computers and vote a million times, and that's just how it landed. Or even worse, I'm not going to go into it too much, but even worse are the Knights of Manfred that are like, oh, you're an aging veteran. I get that it's a cool idea. I don't like that it's a undeserved swan song to show those guys, oh yeah, here's one last All-Star game, because you're going to get guys who have 3 or 4 All-Star games at the end of their career that are undeserved. They're going to have 15 All-Star appearances when they should have had 10. And that's something that people look at when they're looking at Hall of Fame careers, when they're looking at who was the greatest on this team. And same thing with the team representation. I can't stand it. If your team does not have players that are good enough to be considered one of the best of the year, too bad. Better luck next year. Get a better team going. That's almost counterproductive to the way that they're trying to shape the game to make owners be competitive. If you get the participation trophy anyway, here's your representation to the All-Star game. Oh, and by the way, you're out because they needed to be in. Ty France was not the biggest first baseman snub of the year, in my opinion. Freddie Freeman is having an MVP caliber season. I'm not saying he's going to win it because Goldschmidt is just incredible. And I know that is a very, it's a very tight race for first baseman in the National League. The CJ Cron should not have been in the All-Star game. It shouldn't have happened, but Rockies needed representation. And so here's that position, and sorry, you had an incredible year. You're out.
It's, I disagree that Freddie Freeman was the biggest snub. I see the arguments for and against him being in the All-Star game. I don't think he's going to be even top 3 MVP, but I 100% get what you're saying. And I also had a guy that wasn't a Mariner that I believe is the biggest snub, even including Ty France. Dylan Cease. How is this guy not in the All-Star game? He's competing for a Cy Young. I mean, he legitimately might be the front runner for AL Cy Young right now. He's 7-4. Pitching record doesn't matter, especially when you're on a team that's struggling like that. He's got a 2.45 ERA in 92 innings, 133 strikeouts, and a 1.23 WHIP. Those are unbelievable stats. And somehow he misses it. He should be in contention to start the All-Star game for the American League. Now he doesn't even make it. It is absolutely mind-boggling. And how do fans, you want the fans to vote, but you're not going to let them have a say in the pitchers? It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
The representation for each team, I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'm not going to fight for it. I think if you want to do it, you should add spots for those guys, like say 3 spots to the team, if that's how you want to do it. The only team that should 100% have a guy in the All-Star game that you're going to see is whoever's hosting the game.
I do get that.
That is it. That's the only time you should have something like that play a role. It really, I feel like we talk about it every year with the All-Star game, the snubs. This year, it feels like they weren't even close to getting this one right. It just doesn't make any sense at all how they handled things. I do disagree about the legend spot, I guess you could say, especially maybe it's just because this year the guys that they chose are, no doubt Hall of Famers, Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols. Maybe my opinion changes over the next few years, seeing who they decide.
Do you think they're going to make a difference in the All-Star game?
I think it's going to be fun for the fan. I think the fans are going to love it when you see. I think they both are going to get in that bat 100%. They're going to get a standing ovation. I think it's awesome. Albert Pujols is in the home run derby. He doesn't have a shot of winning, no chance. But I think it's good fanfare in that way, especially now that the All-Star game really doesn't mean anything when it's all said and done. You're not playing for home field advantage anymore. So, I mean,
which I also hate.
I did enjoy when it was actually playing for something, but now it's on the same level as the Pro Bowl, like you mentioned, as the NBA All-Star game, which I can't even watch anymore. It's just miserable. It's really sad to see something that I always looked forward to in the summer. I have great memories. You were there going to Bruno's Pizza in Longview and watching the home run derby and then the All-Star game the next day. There's just so many good times, and it feels like things are changing and we're losing that little glimmer of summer that we used to have, which maybe that's what we had to do to get the Mariners playing meaningful baseball in the second half. It really sucks.
Yeah, it just seems like they're taking all of the meaning out of it and putting gimmicks in, saying this is still cool, pay attention. And it's like, no, you're gutting it. So it really hurts. And you mentioned, guys that, well, I mentioned the MVP seasons and you mentioned the Cy Young seasons. So I actually did a little bit of research as to MVP's winners who are not all-stars, which ultimately should be the biggest snub, right? And so the most recent, Jimmy Rollins in 2007, Justin Morneau in 2006, Chipper Jones in 99, Juan Gonzalez in 96. I mean, there are a lot of big name guys that have been absolutely snubbed, not just this year, over the history of the All-Star game. And maybe, it was fan voting and biasness, or maybe it was just they had a slow start to the season. I know Morneau, that was the year that he really came on to the scene. And so he wasn't a big name in 2006. Who knows, how much that played a factor, but it just seems like I'm not alluding to the fact that Ty France is going to win an MVP or anything, but if he does, that add him to the list. It does seem especially bad this year. It really does.
And a big part of it is the market these guys play in. If you're playing in a bigger market, you're going to get that national attention way more, whether your team's good or bad. Absolutely. I mean, remember last year, Mike Trout barely played in the first half and he was named an all-star. And he didn't play that well when he was playing last year. It was just an injury-riddled season. Those happen. Those don't mean that the guy deserves to be in the All-Star game. Nothing they've done in the past should determine if they make the All-Star team. It's got to be just the first half of the season, what they've done. They got to bring that back.
Well, I do get the fan appeal to some extent. I mean, if they're non-deserving, they're non-deserving. Absolutely. But, I mean, I argue to say Ty France is having a better season than Vladdy Jr. Vladdy Jr. has more power. He's having a great season. I'm not putting down his season whatsoever. I still think that Ty France, even with his injury and missing a little bit of time, is having a better season. I think that Vladdy Jr. should be the starter. With that factor involved, I get it. I totally get it. Not upset about that in the slightest. But the stats and the skill and the popularity should all come together to have an equation, not be so off skewed that you're saying, wait, What? How?
And that's exactly what I was saying when those all-star rosters were released. And of course, they've already started naming replacements, and we're still waiting to see Ty France's name pop up onto that roster somewhere. Hopefully he gets on there, because otherwise it is just a disservice to the game of baseball. There are a couple things I am still looking forward to in the All-Star game this year. One of them is that the Astros are going to get booed because they are playing in Dodger Stadium. And Dodgers fans do not like the Astros. They won't keep that a secret. If you think you hate the Astros, Dodgers fans most likely hate them a little bit more. So they are going to get booed out of the building, and good for them, because last year, remember, they said that they didn't even want to go participate. They didn't show up. Now they have to really face the heat, and even next year when they play in Seattle, it's going to be a rough few years in the All-Star game for Astros players, but also those uniforms. We talked about it before we started recording, and they look just so good. And I'm a personal fan of when everyone wore their own uniforms for the All-Star game, but man, these look so cool. So I get the appeal, and I'm not going to be too upset that they're bringing in these new designs, these new looks. I think they really hit a home run with it this year.
They look nice. Yeah. As far as gimmick uniforms go, these are top notch. I mean, I mentioned it before, but the MLB is never going to shy away from the limited run jerseys where, hey, get this particular day or this particular year, and just having sales boom. You're going to have it one way or another. At least let the jerseys not suck. And they're looking pretty snazzy this year.
Look real good. And of course, home run derby. Don't know the entire field yet. We do know Pete Alonso is trying to become the second player to ever win 3 straight and join Ken Griffey Jr. in that club. We also know Juan Soto is going to be in it, Ronald Acuna Jr., and of course, Albert Pujols. There's rumblings that potentially Julio's going to be in it. He says he hasn't quite decided yet, which means the invite is out there. I personally would like to see him pass on it this year and have his first one next year be at home in Seattle. I think that would be the coolest thing. So we'll see what he decides to do there. Either way, it is going to be a fun field to watch. Moving away from the All-Star game now, we're going to move into a little bit of conversation about the wild cards so far. Things have kind of gotten a little chaotic. We're going to start actually with the National League, where things seem to still be a little bit in order. But still some room for things to change. You got the Braves. They're comfortable. It looks like they're going to be in a good spot. Whether they're able to pass the Mets for the division or not is still to be determined. Also, the Padres 3.5 up on the third wild card. They right now have the second, so they're in a good spot. Also, right now, pretty neck and neck with the Dodgers, although the Padres' little slump has given the Dodgers some breathing room. It's really that third wild card spot where right now the Phillies and Cardinals are tied for it. My dark horse, the Phillies, starting to make me look a little good, giving me a little bit of hope. And of course, the Cardinals are fighting for a division still with Milwaukee, so they're hoping to not even have to worry about the wild card. And then you've got the Giants just a couple of games back, and then the Marlins still right there, 4 games back. They're kind of going to be one of those sleeper teams, kind of remind me of the Orioles in the American League. So, I mean, that wild card race right now is really tight, and with the Phillies playing some really good baseball and the Cardinals having a little bit of struggles, things might get very interesting there in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I was really looking, and as it stands right now, I could honestly see the National League having 2 teams from each division go to the playoffs this year. I mean, it just seems perfectly balanced, as all things should be. But Braves and Mets, like you said, neck and neck. Mets looked like they were going to run away with that division, and then the Braves are on a tear. It looks great. Phillies are doing better. They are currently holding a wild card position, but far from a sturdy bet. I still don't quite support your boldest move of the year, putting them above the Braves and the Mets.
They're hot. They're hot.
Yeah. But the Brewers and the Cardinals, I think that's going to be the not as dominant, but just as fun matchup at the end of the year. I could see both teams picking up pace and being very respectable contenders at the end of the season. I mean, you got Paul Goldschmidt being kind of the best player in baseball right now, and can't count him out. And then, you have the West. Dodgers, like you said, getting a more comfortable lead. They're on a 7-game win streak right now, and the Padres kind of sputtering a little bit. And then Giants were kind of neck and neck, or starting to die back down, a couple games above 500 still, but not where they wanted to be a couple weeks ago. So a lot of regular action that you're thinking was probably going to be the case, and it just being a really tight horse race. I enjoy watching it from a distance.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to watch. Glad my team's not a part of that one. Of course, the AL not much better, but I mean, the Giants, they were right there towards the top of all of baseball last season before getting knocked out by the Dodgers. So, I mean, they still got that potential to get hot. I can't write them off. Miami, the most dangerous thing a team can do is have belief in themselves. And if they get hot, who knows what could happen there? They could sneak in. That'd be absolute insanity. But yeah, I think right now you're really looking at, I feel like you can lock in Atlanta to a playoff spot, whether they get past the Mets or not. I feel like San Diego is probably going to be in a spot. And yeah, it's that last wild card. Philly, St. Louis, and San Francisco. And even like you said, Milwaukee still could drop down there. So it's just going to be who can get these additions that they need, because a lot of those teams are cold right now. The Cardinals and Giants both struggling. Milwaukee not playing really good baseball. Philly, they're playing some solid baseball right now. So, I mean, it's just, can those teams right the ship? Can they add the pieces in what's a thin trade market this season to kind of get them over the hump? It's going to be very fascinating to watch and see if any of those teams kind of die down and fall back. While in the American League, I mean, you got two division winners that you feel pretty certain that they have them locked up. The Yankees and the Astros are in a good spot. That AL Central is, it seems like nobody really wants to just take control. The Twins right now are running that division. And then you get to the wild card where Boston has the top spot. Tampa Bay has the second spot. And then the Mariners and Blue Jays tied for that third spot. 2 games separate all of those teams. So anyone could still shift their way up to the top wild card. And then you got Cleveland just a game back, Baltimore 2 games back, the White Sox and Rangers just 3.5 back. So, I mean, it is really a tight race with teams really turning it all of a sudden. The Mariners are red hot. Of course, Baltimore also right there with 8 straight wins. The Blue Jays are really struggling all of a sudden. The Red Sox have turned their season around, because then those first 2 months, they look like they were in deep trouble. And Tampa Bay kind of just floating in the middle, kind of doing what they do. It is absolute madness in the American League right now. Unpredictability at its finest.
Yeah. And I was looking, and honestly, it wouldn't be totally surprising if the AL East locked up all 3 wild card spots. I mean, it's just that incredible of a year for those teams. Like you said, Yankees, they're making the playoffs. Pretty safe to assume they're not going to need a wild card spot to do it. But the Blue Jays, the Rays, the Red Sox, and even the Orioles are still really doing well. I mean, Orioles are tied for the hottest streak in baseball right now. So you can't really count any of them out as we are nearing the All-Star break. Boston and Toronto definitely looking like the strongest candidates. Right now, they're pretty safely in wild card land for me. I'm discrediting the Rays a little bit, not because they're not playing well, but just it seems like every week they have a new injury or 3 that they have to deal with. And I don't know how they can keep sustaining those wins with more and more guys out on sometimes for the rest of the year. AL Central, like you said, a lot more murky, but the Twins are still holding pretty good ground. That's almost more dangerous for the teams chasing wild card spots, because if the White Sox or the Guardians take that spot, then you have to deal with the Twins. they're not out of the wild card race just because they're a division holder right now. And then you have the AL West, where again the Astros are running away with it, not quite as speedily as the Yankees are. And then you got the white hot Mariners, and honestly, the Rangers are playing really good ball right now. So both kind of taking a shot at a wild card spot. So right now, Mariners hold a wild card position, and we'll see how that works going into the trade deadline, and which teams can get some of their pieces back, which teams can rent out some pieces from other teams. But it's an exciting race, that's for sure. It's only July.
I personally think the AL East gets 2 wild cards because those teams are going to have to play each other. They do. One of them might go on a run, but if one of them goes on a run, that means likely one of them's in a little bit of a struggle. So, I mean, they're going to beat up on each other. It's up to those other teams to just take care of business. You know, the Mariners, they get a feast on a kind of weak AL West. Besides the Astros, they've handled the Rangers so far pretty well this season. Then Oakland and the Los Angeles Angels. Cleveland is the team to me that I am circling as these guys might be the team to watch out for in that last wild card. They've got a really good pitching rotation, and they have an MVP candidate in the lineup in Jose Ramirez. They also are going to get to play those AL Central teams. You know, the White Sox are very inconsistent. I just watched before we hopped on here. Tony La Russa just intentionally walked Jose Ramirez in an 0-1 count. I don't know what's going on in the Windy City. It blows my mind.
I think he likes irritating fans.
It's irritating me. But they also, I mean, I trust them to beat Minnesota more than I trust Boston, Tampa Bay, or Toronto to beat the Yankees. And then they get to play those Tigers and Royals too. So, I mean, they have a pretty weak schedule that they can take advantage of. And they've got a pretty decent team, and they're going to add pieces, no doubt. They're kind of a snake in the grass right now, a team that I wouldn't feel super comfortable saying, yeah, I think that this team's probably not that dangerous to us. Cleveland's scary to me.
And not to be biased or anything, but Mariners are kind of looking the same way. Right after the All-Star break, they have quite a few games against both Houston and New York Yankees. After that, they have a pretty doable schedule for the rest of the year. They're getting pieces back that they have been missing for a long time. If they can click pieces into place, they could be north of 92 wins. I'm looking at their schedule, and I'm just kind of playing the odds a little bit. And if pieces return, I could see it happen. So we'll see how it goes.
The stretch right after the All-Star break is gonna, I think, really define the Mariners. They have 3 with Houston, 3 with the Rangers, 4 with Houston, 3 with the Yankees, 4 with the Angels, and then 3 with the Yankees again. That is a pretty tough stretch. They're going to have to take care of business, especially against the Rangers and Angels. And then they're going to have to play good baseball against Houston, which they've shown they're capable of this season. I think the season series right now is split between them and the Astros. It might be one game in favor either side right now, but they can definitely handle those teams. Those games against the Yankees, they're scary. They're real scary, but they're going to have to take care of business, because if they want to go on a serious run and not just contend for making the playoffs, but if they want to try and go on a run and win a World Series, they're going to have to find a way to take out these Yankees and the Red Sox and the Rays, teams that have really handled them so far this season. They haven't seen the Yankees, but I mean, they struggled against the Red Sox and the Rays. So they're going to have to figure out a way to beat those big, powerful teams, the teams that have a lot of history of success that aren't, in the division that they see a ton of, that they can kind of adjust for. So that stretch is going to be very important for the Mariners. Also, I'm very worried about the Blue Jays. They're going to have to figure things out quick, because there is no reason for them to be 1-9 in their last 10 games, especially after playing Oakland. But not when you're playing Oakland before that. You got to find a way to win some of those games. It is really, really bad that they are sitting looking at that headed into this final week before the All-Star break. So the wild card race is definitely going to be absolutely chaotic here as we roll into the second half of the season. We're going to actually go ahead and take a break right now. And when we come back, it is time for probably the most important Mount Rushmore to Jacob and I that we've done thus far. The Seattle Mariners Mount Rushmore, who are the top 4 Mariners in franchise history. We will talk about that coming up next here on the Kingsmen.
The NFHS Learning Center is the leader in online education for the interscholastic community. At nfhslearn.com, you can find over 70 courses, including more than 30 free courses, such as concussion in sports, heat illness prevention, sudden cardiac arrest, and protecting students from abuse. To learn more, visit the NFHS Learning Center.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Another week, another Mount Rushmore. This time, it is the Seattle Mariners. This one is one that I'm not going to lie, coming in, I'm like, oh, this is going to be hard. It wasn't as difficult as I had anticipated. I kind of had I'm not going to lie, I had really 5 that I was really thinking about putting on. I do have a sizable honorable mention list this week because it hits so close to home. But I mean, the top 4, I think, really speak for themselves. So let's go ahead and hop right into it with the first guy, maybe to me, the greatest baseball player of all time, Ken Griffey Jr. I mean, prime Ken Griffey Jr. was just, there's no one like him. Unbelievable career. And of course, the best of it was with Seattle, a 292 hitter, 374, 553 slash line, 417 home runs, 1,216 RBIs, 1,843 hits, and 927 OPS. Unbelievable career. And he did it on defense too. You know, he was the guy. I mean, I got the backwards hat on. He started that. It's unbelievable. There's one story that I loved hearing. It was earlier this season when there was talk about the issues in Atlanta. If Ronald Acuna and Freddie Freeman had issues, apparently they wiped eye black off of his face, allegedly. Harold Reynolds told the story. He's like, yeah, when I was with the Mariners, I once had an issue. This kid came in wearing his hat backwards, and I told him, hey, we don't do that anymore. Yeah, now he's in Cooperstown, and his name's Ken Griffey Jr. So he changed the way the game was played. He changed the way people viewed the game, and he was a hero for a lot of kids, including us growing up. There's nothing else you can really talk about. Baseball starts and ends, especially in Seattle, with Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah, just one of a kind generational talent that defined baseball, not just in Seattle, but in the 90s, period. I think he is on the all MLB Mount Rushmore, without a doubt. Like you said, best player of all time, argumentary, but he's on that list there. And it wasn't just his incredible ball playing and stats that made him so special. I mean, you mentioned a lot of stats. He shaped the game as we know it. You mentioned the hats backwards, but he helped heal baseball after some awful labor dispute battles in the early 90s. He was one of the rare 90s dominant players to do it cleanly. He convinced the MLB to honor Jackie Robinson the way that we do. He is the reason that Seattle still has baseball. Every kid in the 90s, all across America, wanted to copy his swing. I mean, they've made hats and shirts just on his swing. It's incredible. There was no one better to grow up watching. I feel so honored to be able to see him be a player. To add to those stats, 10 All-Star games, one of them being the All-Star MVP, 1 year where he was the American League MVP, 10 Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers, 3 Home Run Derby titles. We were talking earlier about, Pete Alonso's wanting to get to that mark, but Griffey did it when no one else was even close. I mean, and you had some big boys there in the 90s that weren't doing it so cleanly. And the kid is the winner. He's the GOAT. First overall pick ever to be in the Hall of Fame. Did it while coming back to Seattle. I could go on for ages. Like you said, best player of all time.
Should have been the first unanimous selection into the Hall of Fame.
100%. 100%.
Blows my mind out.
If you are a baseball writer and you don't believe that Ken Griffey Jr. belongs in the Hall of Fame, quit your job.
You don't know baseball.
Far away from the sport.
It was baffling. Also went in wearing a Mariners cap, so that was really cool to see as well. So Ken Griffey Jr., no doubt about it, number one through trials and tribulations. If you haven't heard that news on Ken Griffey Jr., how everything started, go look at it. He struggled, definitely. Just shows not everything is all glamorous for those guys. Go ahead and check that out on Ken Griffey Jr. Let's go ahead and hop into our next one. Another guy who's going into the Hall of Fame as a Mariner, no question about it. It's Ichiro. I mean, you want to talk about another guy who really was bigger than the game of baseball. Ichiro was another one. I mean, he was kind of the guy who started that wave of Japanese players coming in. I know there were some other guys before him, but when Ichiro came over and had the success that he did, all of a sudden there was a whole tidal wave of guys coming in as well. And he was just an unbelievable hitter. I know a lot of people kind of try and nitpick at him saying, oh, he really wasn't worth the money because he didn't drive in runs. He didn't hit home runs. He hit career 321, had a 365, 416 slash line, just 99 home runs with the Mariners, 633 RBIs, 517 walks, 2,542 hits, 781 OPS. And the defense, again, I'll never forget that call by Dave Niehaus saying that he threw something out of Star Wars to get Jermaine Dye I believe it was Terrence Long at third base against Oakland. Unbelievable. And some of the catches he made were just ridiculous. Of course, everyone knew the Ichiro stretch when he was coming up to the plate. And he's a funny guy too. I mean, the conversation he had about Tom Brady is just iconic. So great and just good for baseball. Again, no real controversy around him either. Just came in, hit the ball, and waited for other guys to drive him in, and he hit the ball so well. 10 straight years of 200 or more hits. There will never be another Ichiro. The only other guy who can really be put in the same conversation as Pete Rose for the hit king. Unbelievable career for that man.
Yeah. My two favorite Ichiro quotes are Tom Brady and Cleveland. You can't get better than Ichiro. I once heard someone say that Ichiro is the biggest name in all of Japan, and it's not even comparable to anything we have in the US celebrity status wise. It would be like Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, and Tom Hanks all rolled into one person. It's just incredible. No one over there goes by just one name. It's all about family. And then you have Ichiro. Just so cool. One of the most electric players of the 2000s. You could tell there was no one who had the raw skill and just the love of the game like Ichiro. 14 years as a Mariner, 10 straight All-Star games, 10 straight Gold Gloves, 3 Silver Sluggers, 2 batting titles, 1 Rookie of the Year and MVP his first season as a 27-year-old. Averaged 159 games a year as a Mariner. Just incredible. Just I have books of these guys. I mean, I cut it down a lot because I don't want to make this Rushmore an hour long, but you add all that to the fact that his single season hit record, 262, his, like you mentioned, 10 consecutive seasons with 200 hits, one of the scariest speedsters of all time. I think he was one of the first guys to hit that 99 speed on those baseball video games back in the day. Just quick. Before that was really a thing. I mean, you had incredible base runners back in the day. Don't get me wrong, but that measurable speed of wow, and this guy's almost 30 years old. That's incredible. He will 100% be the third Mariner to get into Cooperstown in 2025. It won't even be close. Literally, the only thing that will stop that from happening is if he unretires, which he loves the game so much, it might actually happen and push his Hall of Fame bid back a few years. But yeah, you loved watching the guy.
He was incredible. There was a foreign exchange student from Japan that I went to high school with for a year, and the way she talked about Ichiro, how Ichiro was viewed back home in Japan. Yeah, you would have thought they were talking about some gigantic rock star, movie star, a mega star who did it all. I mean, Ichiro is bigger in Japan than, say, The Rock is in the U.S. It is just really mind-boggling. And one of the coolest things that I remember about Ichiro wasn't even when he was a Mariner. It was when he was a Marlin and got that 3,000th hit. We were at a Mariners game. It was the Mariners had just swept the Angels and they put it on the big board, and that place erupted like that was going on right in front of them. There's just a love for Ichiro here in Washington State that is just unparalleled. I mean, the guy is just special, and he's continuing to work with the Mariners. You can tell his heart is in Seattle. He loves being here, and we loved having him. Unbelievable career there. Now we head to our next guy, another unbelievably loved Mariner. It's Edgar Martinez. And this, like you said, another Hall of Famer for the Mariners. He was the second, and they had to really work to get him in. They shouldn't have had to work that hard to get him in. His career, 312, 418, 515 slash line, 309 home runs, 1,261 RBIs, 1,283 walks, 2,247 hits with a 933 OPS, a Mariner for life. They named the DH of the Year award after him. That should just be enough. You know, it's kind of unfair that they put this much pressure on DHs, but I think it's because of guys like Edgar Martinez and David Ortiz that they're like, those guys are DHs. They just have to worry about hitting, and look at what they do. That's a little unfair because they are just special players, and especially Edgar has some issues with his eyes and is still able to go out there and hit the ball as well as he did. And of course, one of the two greatest Mariners commercials of all time with the light duck or the light bat and the gooey duck is just unbelievable. He's hilarious, a Mariners icon. And of course, they brought him in as a hitting coach. He still does a little bit with the Mariners, have his number retired, one of only 3 numbers retired in Seattle, joining Griffey and, of course, Jackie Robinson. Just unbelievable career by just an all-around likable guy.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, his eyes. One of my favorite Edgar stories is actually after he retired. He was the hitting coach for the Mariners, and the guys were just begging him. This was a few years back. The guys were just begging him to take BP with him. And he's like, no, I haven't been doing my workouts. And they're like, please. So he does it, and he does decent, but not Edgar hitting. And he's like, let me do my workouts. And he wasn't talking about like his stretches or his muscles. He was talking about his eye workouts. Like he needed to exercise his eye muscles to be able to see the ball. And so he comes back a couple months later, and it's like he was still playing the game. He just worked those muscles, and they're like, oh, this is our hitting coach. Okay, that's cool. could be our cleanup hitter, but yeah. Just like you mentioned, they named the award after him because he was so good at his specialized position. And thank goodness that he was in the league a few years before David Ortiz. Otherwise, that might have been a little different. But those two just created that position, and then they broke the mold afterward. It is one of the greatest justices in all of baseball that he made it into the Hall of Fame. And anyone who voted against him was not paying attention. You can blame National League bias and hating on the DH or Seattle not winning enough. If you voted against Edgar, you were not paying attention to that man's career. You said the stats: 7 All-Star Game appearances, 5 Silver Sluggers, 2 batting titles, a Roberto Clemente Award. You can see why the people of Seattle named a street after him. He is an absolute all-time great, one of the game's most prolific, pure offensive guys to ever do it. He was the definition of stability. Career average of 312. That's in the top 100 of all baseball of all time. Just, you can see league leading stats peppered all throughout his career, even into his near 40s. I mean, just an incredible player. Another one that I just feel honored to be able to grow up watching him. I feel like these 3 players we're going to be talking about 50 years from now and just saying, oh, you should have seen those guys. Oh, you should have seen baseball then.
They're going to hold special places in our hearts and minds forever, especially growing up as Mariners fans. They are just special, special talents. Now for the final spot, which was the most difficult, and I will put this out there. Jacob and I talked about before we ever started the first Mount Rushmore. If it was just players, if it wasn't just players, I'd have Dave Niehaus in number 4. No questions asked. But we decided to go just players. So it really came down to Felix Hernandez and Randy Johnson. I went with Felix Hernandez, who never played a game as a member of another team. So right now he can be considered a Mariner for life as well.
Yes.
But unbelievable career, 169 wins with a 3.42 ERA, a 3.52 FIP, 1.206 WHIP, 2,524 strikeouts, 25 complete games. If you look at his numbers compared to Randy Johnson, he actually has better numbers as a Mariner, and that's with his last 2 years being not good at all. So that inflated those numbers, and to think he still put up better numbers, better stats than Randy Johnson, it had to be Felix. He holds a special place for me because of his last day as a Tacoma Rainier. I got his autograph, and then he walked off. He didn't sign another autograph. Next day, he was called up to play in the big leagues. Just one of the coolest things, probably the coolest possession I have, is that card for the Rainiers that he signed. Of course, the perfect game will always be remembered. I'm sure you have that on your things to talk about as well.
Oh, yes.
One of the best changeups in all of baseball history, just completely filthy. Was the face of baseball really in Latin America there for a while, especially pitching wise. He was just the best from that region. Of course, coming from Venezuela, unbelievable career for him. Unfortunate that the last few years probably are going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. Maybe he'll get in for some players vote down the road, but I don't see it happening with the baseball writers. It's a shame because he was unbelievable and he should have had a lot more pitching wins. He was the king of 1-0 losses. Unbelievable career for Felix Hernandez.
Yeah, I also have him rounding out the mountain here. I said Felix Abraham Hernandez, the first of his name, king of the corner of Edgar and Dave, protector of the League of America, father of named seating sections, the perfect breaker of chains that dictate that Cy Young winners need to have a dominant win-loss record when their team has no offensive prowess to support them. Seriously.
It's a long title. That's a long title.
It is. Yeah. This guy is the picture perfect definition of a dominant pitcher with no run support. And he changed the way that baseball fans looked at Cy Young winners, because that year, in 2010, he actually, talking about all-star snubs, did not make the all-star game that year, won Cy Young. Not the best record. I think he had one more win than he did losses that year. Incredible in every other stat. You had to give it to him because he was the best pitcher in the league on one of the worst teams in the league. So, like you mentioned, it is an absolute crying shame that the last few years, I'll even say bleeding into his 3rd and 4th season back, injury and age, his velocity really coming down. It really hurt his ability to torment teams. And you're right. I think that is going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. If you looked in 2014, 2015, and you're like, this guy still has 5, 8, 10 years to go, you would have thought that a Hall of Fame career was a no-brainer. And it really does hurt to see that career end the way that it did. That send off was just amazing. I feel like there was more cheers and we love Felix's that night than the perfect game. They had, that huge King's Court, and after the game, he just spent half hour, 40 minutes, it seemed, with him, just getting showered with love. 6 All-Star games. Again, 2010 was that year in between that he didn't make it, and he should have. Has pretty much every single starting pitcher franchise record you can imagine, except that win-loss percent record. In 2008, had a perfect on-base slugging of 5,000. People don't talk about his hitting, but that grand slam against Johan Santana was amazing. Absolute incredible, true ace. Eased a lot of heartache for Mariner fans when there really was not a lot more going on in those years.
Yeah, probably the second most famous home run by a pitcher behind Bartolo Colon's for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's just really crazy to think about. Even think about that perfect game. They won that game 1-0. So he was pitching not only to protect the perfect game, he was trying to get his team a win. He never got to play in the playoffs, which is a crying shame. Throughout his prime, there were so many pitchers that came and went. There were a lot of Zach Greinke. Yeah, he was pretty good, but he was in and out of the league. There was Cliff Lee, who was, pretty good in and out. CC Sabathia. Felix Hernandez and Justin Verlander were the staples during that time. Those are the guys you did not want to see on the mound when you were playing the Mariners or Tigers. He was just one of the most feared pitchers in all of baseball, despite the fact that he was playing on a very bad team year in and year out. That just goes to show you how good he was. That team still didn't want to play Seattle because you might have to face Felix Hernandez. And yeah, the emotions coming out when he walked off that field for the last time with the King's Court, something that was just so cool to be able to experience there. Felix Hernandez, a great person, a great ambassador for the game as well. It's a shame that he will not get into the Hall of Fame, but there's our top 4: Ken Griffey Jr., Ichiro, Edgar, and Felix. We did have some honorable mentions. I think we shared all. I had one extra. Randy Johnson, Dan Wilson, Alvin Davis, Jamie Moyer, and Kyle Seager. And I also threw on Jay Buhner as well. Some guys, Jay Buhner with the Seinfeld skit got a lot of attention there that one. A lot of these guys played really, really great careers. Kyle Seager, a Mariner for life, just retired. It was really hard. We could go on and on about all these honorable mentions. Guys we enjoyed growing up that might not have been, the biggest names. I talked about it when we were getting ready to do this. Jose Lopez, a guy I loved watching. No way he gets on the Mount Rushmore, but I wanted to find a way to bring him up so bad. Just so many guys like that being Mariners fans. It's hard to do this for your own team and not just talk about guy after guy after guy.
Yeah. And so I won't. Yeah. the honorable mentions list, like you mentioned, fantastic. I do want to point out Jamie Moyer, only pitcher in the history of the game to have a shutout in 4 separate decades. I love that factoid. It just fantastic. He didn't need velocity. He had pinpoint precision. That's what he did. He knew the location to throw to get outs. Phenomenal. Alvin Davis, Mr. Mariner, first big star of the franchise. I mean, Dan, the man Wilson, definition of defensive reliability. .995 fielding percentage career-wise. Incredible. Solid hitter, too. And then, like you said, Kyle Seager, it hurt the way that it ended. Another wasted Mariner talent that gave the team their all when the team really wasn't giving it back most of the time. And then Randy Johnson, one of the best pitchers of all time. His Mariner career alone, not quite as good and electric as Felix's was. Felix had a couple extra years there to give him that push, but just gotta love this team. Gotta love these guys.
Gotta love these guys, that's for sure. And hopefully this is the year we get back to the playoffs. We can stop hearing about that drought. So obviously an important one to both of us, but that'll do it for the Mariners Mount Rushmore. Next week, I guess we'll kind of stay with Seattle. Will any former Seattle Pilots make the Mount Rushmore for the Milwaukee Brewers, who we will dig
Probably
in on
not.
next week? Yeah, spoiler, no. But we will talk about the top 4 Milwaukee Brewers next week. Kind of my number 2 team, I guess. My love of Wisconsin sports, I guess they got to be right up there as well. Of course, not even close to my love of the Seattle Mariners. But we will talk about the Brewers next week. We will take one more quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up, talk about some interesting quarterback position battles in the NFL offseason. Those will be coming up next here on the Kingsmen.
Pacific Mobile Structures are big supporters of kids and athletics. If you are in need of temporary office space on a work site or for overflow space, or if your building is in need of major renovation, Pacific Mobile Structures can keep your company at work. Pacific Mobile Structures offers everything from traditional modular classroom space to complete multi-purpose college campus buildings, including Sage Classrooms, which combine the latest in healthy learning environments with the best in green building practices. Pacific Mobile Structures can also offer you permanent space for a fraction of the cost to build your own. Go online to check out Pacific Mobile Structures.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We're going to talk about some NFL quarterback battles where we have some question marks on who will start for their respective team coming up here in the 2022 season. So we're going to dive right into it. We're going to start with the arguably biggest one here this season. That is Jimmy Garoppolo versus Trey Lance. Who will be the starter for the 49ers? This one's super interesting. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's done a lot for this team. Took him to a Super Bowl, coming off of an NFC Championship game appearance against the young rookie, the young lion, Trey Lance, who they traded up for. They spent a lot of draft capital to get him. Of course, there's talk, will Jimmy G get traded? It's very, very interesting. What do you think the Niners are looking to do here this season?
Oh, it's ugly is what it is. I honestly think that the Niners are done with Jimmy G. I think that he has taken them farther than honestly I thought he was going to. I don't think that they're happy with how their team has ended up, and I feel like they're looking for a scapegoat, and they're making him it. Add that to the fact that he is holding so much dead weight for the team in salary. You're right. It's hard to tell if he is going to be dished, if he's going to be handcuffed. Lance is not a good replacement. I don't think that that's the answer. I think it's going to be a rough year at quarterback for the team, really, no matter what they decide, which is kind of unfortunate because they're a pretty stacked team other than that. I think that quarterback and then running back is their most lacking position that they have. But it's hard when you don't know what you're going to do quarterback wise. I think that they're kind of in limbo right now.
I disagree wholeheartedly with the running back. I think they've got almost too much talent in a running back. They just can't keep those guys healthy. I think the answer is Jimmy G. Why would you get rid of a guy who you've gotten to the Super Bowl, should have won a Super Bowl? There's no reason they should have lost to the Chiefs that year. They had the lead. The defense just all of a sudden fell apart. And what's a very, very good defense that year, especially. I just think Jimmy G, if he can't get you over the hump this year, then you have that young guy who has another year to kind of learn, adapt to the NFL system, and then you can get Trey Lance more involved. Remember last year, he didn't see the field that much. He started a game against Seattle, was thrown into some packages here and there, but I mean, for the most part, he didn't see any very serious playing time for the Niners. So I think get him another year, maybe throw him in a little bit more this year, get him more packages involved, more scrambling, quarterback designed runs, and then see what you have. So I think Jimmy G is the answer for the Niners, at least for this season. Let's hop now to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have an interesting one with Mitchell Trubisky against Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, of course, they just drafted from the University of Pittsburgh. Mitch Trubisky, I mean, when you look at his stats, they aren't that bad. He's got a winning record as a quarterback, been to the playoffs a couple of times with the Bears, never got that playoff win. Sorry, Bears fans, but the double doink is still hilarious to me. Now the question is he good enough for the Steelers? Remember, on those Bears teams, they had a very elite defense. He didn't have to do too much. You know who else has a very elite defense? The Pittsburgh Steelers. So, I mean, things are going to be very interesting if they want to give Trubisky the year and let Kenny Pickett develop. I think that's how I'm always going to go when it comes to rookies, is let the guy have a year to adjust. If things aren't going well, you can throw him in later in the season. But I think to start Mitch Trubisky, you went out and got him. You got to at least give him a crack at it, I guess.
Yeah. And to be honest, this one is the most exciting one for me, quarterback matchup wise. Yeah, you have Trubisky, who has NFL and Steelers experience and like you said, pretty decent success, versus the only quarterback selected in the first round of the draft with hometown roots, with prior personnel relations. So this one, I really don't know who's going to get the green light here week one. But I'm honestly thinking most people in Pittsburgh are hoping to see Pickett succeed quicker than giving Trubisky that extra year to see what happens and Pickett to get that experience. No, I think that they want to go out and see what happens with this kid.
I will also point out Mitch Trubisky, most of his success came with Matt Nagy as a head coach. Now he's got a very good head coach that has been there, done that, and Mike Tomlin. So could be interesting to see how that kind of adjusts his game, see where they can go from there. Now let's get into another one, which is a fairly new quarterback battle. That is Sam Darnold against Baker Mayfield for the Carolina Panthers starting spot. For me, the answer is easy. I have never bought into Sam Darnold. I watched him play in Pullman for USC against the Cougs. Cougs won. Good news. I just never bought into the hype. I never thought he was that good. Baker Mayfield, again, I'm a Baker believer. He's been took the Browns to the playoffs, won them a playoff game, played last year, hurt, and all of a sudden he's no good to these teams. I don't understand it. If the injury's still there, that makes a little bit more sense, but I don't think it is. I think this is a pretty solid guy who gives a lot to the community that he's in. He's going to sell out. He's not a Johnny Manziel. He is focused on football, wants to have success in football. I just think Baker is the obvious choice here, especially they're not even paying him that much money. The Browns are paying most of his salary, so why not go out there and see what he's got for practically nothing?
Yeah, Browns are paying some of his salary. He took a salary cut to make this deal happen. He's ready to play football. He's finally free of the Cleveland, I'll call it a crapshoot to keep it a little more family. But they were just keeping him on the hook pointlessly. And I feel like he is ready for revenge. Carolina got him for a reason. They plan on giving him a real shot here. And especially with Darnold's work history, I agree with you. I don't think there's any question to it. If he's healthy, Baker is getting the job.
Let's move into a more local one that I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are more drawn in on, and that's for the Seahawks, Geno Smith against Drew Lock. I personally think this one should be a pretty easy call. I think we've seen enough of Geno Smith. I think we know he's not a winning quarterback in the NFL. He's a backup at best. Drew Lock's still young. He still has some untapped potential maybe. And again, you went out and traded for the guy. You got to give him a crack at it. I think Pete Carroll really likes Drew Lock. I don't think he's just blowing smoke when he says that he likes what he sees in Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock's got to be the guy for them. He's got that young vibe to him. He can scramble much better than Geno Smith. And again, I just think we've seen enough of Geno Smith to kind of close that book and say, yeah, he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL.
And I think that Seahawks knew that when they got Geno Smith. He knows the system. He's been a Wilson backup for a couple of years now, but the Seahawks have never offered him more than a 1-year contract. They aren't wanting to invest in him. Rightfully so. He is the comfortable backup. Drew Lock, like you mentioned, untapped potential upside. Not much of it was shown in Denver, where injury or lacklusterness led to Denver dishing him or benching him or just really not giving him a lot of healthy playtime. Seahawks, they're in a rebuild-ish year. I see them going for Drew Lock. That's how it's going to play out. they're taking the chance with Locke, and then Geno is that safety net with much less potential upside.
And I mean, Geno Smith kind of blew two of the Seahawks' best played games defensively last year against Pittsburgh and New Orleans. He just could not get the job done to get the Seahawks at least one of those games. So yeah, Drew Lock, I think, is the easy answer here. We're going to close this up with the Atlanta Falcons. A very interesting one here. Marcus Mariota against Desmond Ridder. This one again is a veteran coming in versus a rookie. I think it's Mariota. You gave him the money. And again, you didn't like Ridder that much to go up and draft him early. He fell quite a bit. I think Mariota's got to be the answer. He showed glimpses with the Raiders, at least. Looked much better there than he did in Tennessee after that one good year with the Titans. So I think Mariota's got to be the guy. Give him a shot. I don't think there's a lot there for Atlanta to work with regardless, but I think Mariota should be their guy under center this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Falcons are hoping to develop Ridder. I mean, who knows if it's going to pan out or not. But it's not really an alert the presses situation. Like you mentioned, he fell pretty deep. It's Mariota. He has familiarity with Arthur Smith. They were with each other in Tennessee. He is going to start next season. Now, he, like you mentioned, has bounced around a little bit, quite a bit of varied success and durability. So that's not really alert the presses either by any means. But Atlanta will see where the experiment goes before going to a later round rookie.
Well, there you go. There's your quarterback battles to watch and what we think of them personally. Of course, who knows what could happen. Jimmy Garoppolo could still get traded and just throw everything into chaos, especially if he goes to like a Seattle or somewhere like that. It can be very, very interesting. That'll do it, though, for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, we appreciate the support every single week. Don't forget to follow our other socials that are going to be tagged in this post as well. Got to go check those out. Vote in our polls. Let us know who you think had the right Mount Rushmore, who you think is going to win our MLB Teams of the Month. Right now, it's not looking so good for Jacob, but there's still plenty of baseball left to be had there as well. We will see you next week. We know we'll have Brewers and Mount Rushmore next week. And then, of course, we'll talk about the All-Star Game preview. And, of course, maybe give our Home Run Derby predictions. Of course, the episode will come out after the Home Run Derby, but we'll give our predictions before anyway. You never know. And plus, we'll try and get on our big college football news of the Pac-12 being on the deathbed. So hopefully we'll be able to have you that next week here on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.